Good evening, welcome to the Buck Stops here. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, extremely strong words from the Supreme Court which makes it clear that extrajudicial killings, in other words fake encounters, will not be tolerated in Manipur, where the controversial Armed Forces Special Powers Act is in force to help security agencies fight insurgency. What's more, there will be no immunity from prosecution for security forces if there are complaints of human rights abuse. And more than 1,500 cases of alleged fake encounters will now be investigated, though it's not clear yet by which agency. On the show tonight, the army cannot use excessive force in disturbed areas, or the police or the paramilitary forces for that matter. But the question we are asking is, has the Supreme Court's verdict clipped the army's wings? If members of our armed forces are deployed and employed to kill citizens of our country on the mere allegation or suspicion that they are enemy, not only the rule of law, but our democracy would be in grave danger. Very strong words from the Supreme Court, which has made it clear that the army, police and paramilitary forces cannot use excessive force in areas in Manipur where the controversial Armed Forces Special Powers Act is in place. What's more, security forces are not immune to legal scrutiny if there are allegations of human rights abuse, and more than 1,500 allegations of extrajudicial killings in Manipur between 2000 and 2012 will now be investigated. Longjam Meena is the mother of Longjam Uttam Kumar, who was killed in his own house by police in 2008. She says her son was shot dead and a gun planted to make it appear that he was attacking the police.
ꯑꯃ ꯑꯣꯏꯔꯣ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯗꯟꯗꯤ ꯄꯤꯕꯤꯌꯨ ꯁꯤ ꯄꯥꯝꯖꯩ ꯏꯃꯥꯅ ꯂꯩꯔꯤ ꯃꯌꯥꯝꯁꯦ ꯁꯨꯝ ꯍꯦꯛ ꯌꯦꯡꯕꯗꯅꯦ ꯁꯤꯈ꯭ꯔꯀꯥꯟꯗꯅꯦ ꯑꯦꯁꯒꯦꯁꯤꯌꯥ ꯂꯧꯔꯒ ꯍꯦꯛꯇ ꯂꯣꯏꯁꯟꯕ ꯑꯗꯣ ꯏꯃꯥꯒꯤꯗꯤ ꯑꯗꯨ ꯇꯧꯈꯤꯗ꯭ꯔꯦꯕ.
For the army, which has been shielded by AFSPA for 3 decades in Manipur, today's verdict may mean having to restructure cordon and search operations against militants in the state. So far, AFSPA has allowed soldiers to open fire in disturbed areas without fear of prosecution.
This was passed in 1958 by the Parliament, because the Union of India realizes that if you have to exercise control over these areas, then the soldiers need some kind of a legal protection.
But human rights activists, including Irom Sharmila, who's been force-fed for 16 years after she went on hunger strike in protest of AFSPA, will disagree. Today's a big day, they argue, for justice for innocent citizens wrongly gunned down in the fight against insurgency. With Alok Pandey, Vishnu Shom for NDTV. Well, a big verdict by the Supreme Court today. This debate on the Armed Forces Special Powers Act has gone on now for a very long time. It's been a real issue in Kashmir. It's certainly been an issue in the northeast, and now with regard to Manipur, the Supreme Court has made it clear that extrajudicial killings, fake encounters is one way of actually phrasing it. None of that will be tolerated at all, and very significantly, 1,500 cases between 2000 and 2012 will be investigated. Joining us now to debate this and whether the wings of the army, the paramilitary forces and the police have been clipped or not, I'm joined by Colin Gonsalves. He's been very closely associated with this case, senior advocate in the Supreme Court. Lieutenant General R.S. Kadyan, the former Deputy Chief of Army Staff, with us. Ejaz Ilmi, the BJP leader. And also joining me, Bina Lakshmi Nepram. She's a writer and activist and follows human rights and civil rights issues in the Northeast very, very closely. Mr. Gonsalves, let me come to you first. The Armed Forces Special Powers Act, many people believe, is outdated, it's passé, it doesn't recognize the basic rights that any individual, any human needs to have, irrespective of whether they live in a disturbed area or not. With today's judgment, is there some way in which that concern is being rectified?
Vishnu, I can't hear you very clearly. There's some disturbance on the line. But I must say this is the first part of a two-part judgment, and the two-part judgment, the second part is expected after some 4 or 8 weeks or so. But the first part lays down the principles of conduct for the armed forces and the police in Manipur, and it lays down certain principles which I think starts off on a very positive line. First of all, it says that the use of the armed forces for such a prolonged period of time indicates that there is a failure of the civilian administration or there is a failure of the armed forces. And it cannot be that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act carries on to be in force for 50 years or more. Something is very fundamentally wrong. It debunks the government of India's stand that India is at war with certain enemies in Manipur, and the Supreme Court judgment says there's no war. There's also no armed rebellion. It's only a question of internal disturbance, and the civil administration must gear up to handle this internal disturbance with the aid of the armed forces. It categorically says that the armed forces cannot supplant the civil administration, and it says that any killing by the armed forces or the police must be thoroughly inquired into, and it rejects the defense that the Human Rights Division of the Army has conducted an inquiry and that is enough. So the Supreme Court says that's not good enough at all. Very important, it says that the armed forces should not be used against the men and women of this country, the citizens of this country. And it's time to stop this use of armed forces, which are best suited for fighting an enemy outside. We must stop this use by the armed forces to attack our own countrymen.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez,
It debunks the idea that there is absolute immunity.
I want to get, we'll discuss many
For
other
the armed
points. I want to
forces.
get, in general, Raj Kadyan over here. Sir, I'm going to read out one very important part of the judgment. It says, if members of our armed forces are deployed and employed to kill citizens of our country on the mere allegation or suspicion that they are enemy, not only the rule of law, but our democracy would be in grave danger. Does this essentially mean that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, as you know it, in the Northeast, is over?
Vishnu, before I can comment on the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, let me make a very humble submission. I have the highest regard for the judiciary, but my request is that for subjects dealing with national security, the issues need to be looked at more pragmatically rather than idealistically. Now, no army in the world anywhere ever likes to get involved into counter-insurgency operations, which are the most complicated, most difficult and most disliked. However, Indian Army has been unique for having been so deployed almost without a break in the last 60 years in various parts of the country. It is not Army's liking, it is not Army choice. Now coming back to the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Unfortunately, this has become a very favorite punching bag for various right activists.
Punching bag for rights activists,
an enabling act. This is an enabling act which is passed by the Parliament of India to give a legal cover to the members of the army. I am speaking only about the army at the moment. My domain knowledge does not extend to others.
Half a second, Veena.
Every army that gets deployed anywhere in civil areas has been given a legal cover. We are not an exception.
No, but sir, why the question?
It is a usual
sir,
tactic.
The question is this, sir, General Kadyan, why does the army or the police or the paramilitary require this legal cover? Shouldn't the principle of justice exist even in the conduct of counterinsurgency operations? Surely nobody expects the armed forces to go and shoot anybody they believe is a suspect. Yeah.
Vishnu, 2 points. Let us look at it, look at the ground situation. I am speaking in the capacity of someone who's been there at the receiving end. You send a soldier in a situation without his consent and quite often against his will. then you expect him to perform a very difficult task and achieve a success.
Our army, Bina. Let's not.
Then you also tie down his hand by telling him that if you make a mistake, you will be held up by the criminal court. Which human being would like to do a task with sincerity and dedication,
I think,
commitment
Bina,
with
in
those
as much
kind of
as
restrictions?
we speak about the rights issue, I think what the general says has a lot of merit. Our soldiers operate in very difficult conditions in the northeast against a very difficult insurgency.
Absolutely.
And while excesses, as the Supreme Court seems to believe, may have occurred, there needs to be some respect of the fact that these operations are conducted in very difficult circumstances. And therefore, the armed forces, the army, believes AFSPA must remain.
Vishnu, first of all, let me be very clear. The Armed Forces Special Power Act was passed in the Indian Parliament in May 1958. It was only supposed to be there for a few months. It was supposed to be an emergency act only for a few months.
It's been
but
there
it's
for more
there
than
for
3
more
decades.
than 58 years.
And in Manipur for more than 3 decades.
Absolutely,
right?
more than, in fact, more than
years.
3. It's in the Naga Hills, which also covers parts of Manipur. Since 1958, that's where the act was first imposed. The Armed Forces Special Act, General Guardian, and many others, was actually a colonial British act, which was there to thwart the Quit India movement. We adopted it against our own people. As Colin also said, that are we engaging into a war against the nation? 20,000 Manipuris have died because of the insurgency and counter-insurgency operations.
But what about the number of armed forces personnel who also died?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Those numbers are also fairly horrific.
General Guardian said that, punching back, okay, forget the rights activists or families who have been as a part of the... Today is actually the people of Manipur, particularly the 20,000 family members beyond the 1,500. Today is a moment of quiet dignity for them. Many of our bodies of our young people whom we could not even find, many of those who have been tortured and killed. Forget us. Jivan Reddy Commission in 2004, the Moili Commission 2007, the present Vice President of India Hamid Ansari's commission in 2007 have asked for the repeal of the Armed Forces Special Power. These are not Manipuris. These are credible members of the community of our country who are saying that this act needs to go. By the way, so, we believe in the Indian Constitution. India says every Indian has a right to life.
Yes.
This act says you have no right to life in Manipur. As a committed citizen of this country, how do you feel as equal citizens in an equal country when you say in Manipur you get shot dead? No one says no to the army. The army has done magnificent work in flood, in counter and other operations, but then we are always saying do not equip them in extraordinary law. It's against our own constitution, it's against the rights principles.
Okay.
This is what we're asking.
Okay.
This.
I just come in as a BJP leader because the BJP in Kashmir and also in the northeast feels that the army's voice needs to be heard when it comes to the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Today you have this very strong Supreme Court verdict. What is the position of your party on this?
Well, we're very, very clear. We know it's a very complex situation, whether it's Kashmir or it's Manipur. There are over 16 active groups out of 30, 40 which have gone about. Each of them engaged in arms running, drug peddling, individual groups trying to usurp, and insurgent groups trying to up the government at all given times, abducting children, making them child soldiers. So the offences have been there from the insurgent side. In fact, I feel the army, to a large extent, has protected a large parts of Manipur from the wrath of the insurgents as far as abduction is concerned, killing is concerned, picking up children is concerned, making them child soldiers.
So therefore, as far as AFSPA is concerned...
No, AFSPA obviously is an enabling mechanism. The fact is...
It's a living mechanism.
No, it's an enabling mechanism.
An enabling mechanism,
it is important
which must remain.
It has to remain. The only reason to withdraw AFSPA has to come in consonance with the defense establishment which is taking care of the security of the state.
But nobody is talking about withdrawing AFSPA. It remains with conditions.
Yes. And
those conditions are that prosecution can take
those
place
conditions by the
if there
Supreme
are
Court have been
complaints.
there for the last 15 years. The do's and don'ts are very clear. The commandments the army has to live by. Those.
No, but
if there are excesses, let them be looked into. The fact is the army is doing a spectacular job in making sure for the last 58 years, 63 years, keeping Manipur together with
Colin
the
Gonzalez.
Union of India.
BJP in their manifesto before elections in Manipur said, if we come to power, we will repeal the Armed Forces Special Act. Why are you lying now?
We are
You said you will repeal the Armed Forces.
The government of India...
Imam Sharmil hasn't eaten for 16 years.
I agree with
Is she
you.
not a citizen of
We
this
are not in
country?
power for the last 16 years. Let me
We
assure
are
you.
not asking the army should move out. Let it protect the 5 countries border that we have with 5 countries. We are not saying no to the army. But do not give them impunity.
We have-
Thangjam Manorama, how she was murdered and raped and
I
killed.
totally agree with you.
So we
I
all
totally,
say-
nobody can justify these killings. But at
Absolutely.
the same time, nobody can justify the killing of innocent
No,
Indian
but the
citizens
political
and
promise-
Manipuris,
the
by
promise-
people
the-
of Myanmar
Absolutely.
operating in Nagaland, the
Absolutely.
Kukis,
No, but the
Walpis,
promise that the
Pangals.
BJP had made, which Bina refers to, of the BJP saying that AFSPA will go in Manipur, you haven't done that
We
yet.
said we'll look at AFSPA, the fact of
we have the manifesto.
you have the manifesto. No government can repeal AFSPA without consulting the army, which is in the
Then why
forefront.
did you write in your manifesto?
No, it's the situation conducive. Children are still being picked up, kidnapped,
Peculiar.
their child shoulders. No, if the insurgency doesn't stop, if innocents are not being killed all the time, if there's secession happening and there are 20 groups trying to eat up the profits and do abductions,
It's not
kill
only
industry,
20, it's 60 groups, by the way.
60 groups, largely groups, 20 are active right now.